Hi, welcome back to Flipping Pages Stirring Sauces. As I've said before, it is an unusual name or unusual title for the platform, but the title is born out of my love for cooking, baking, eating, reading, writing, and being a mom. And all those things, the reading, the writing, the cooking, the baking, all goes with being a mom. And I truly love being a mom. Um, the book we're featuring is called Spiritual Messages Channeled Through Me, written by my sister Denise Green, and she has given me full written authority to present it in its entirety on this platform. So will continue to do that. Further on or later on, I will be featuring some of my own books and sharing some of my secret recipes with you. I'll be doing some cooking, some baking, and I might even throw in some fun times hanging out with the boys and just having a good time. And much later on, I will be getting into a much more serious topic that, like I said, is everywhere these days. And hopefully that will help somebody to come forward and talk about that which they believe they cannot talk about, which they believe that nobody will believe them. But as long as you know the truth and you present the truth in a fair manner, um, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. And it took me a long time to come to that realization, but I've come to that realization, and that realization has set me free. And you know, person who is set free is free indeed. So last time I believe we left off at chapter 12, I think it was. No, it was chapter 11 that we left off at last time. So we will be picking up at chapter 12, which is entitled The Trip. And as I've said before, I'm not a perfect person, so please do not expect perfection from me. I will misread sentences and I will mispronounce words. I will do my best to correct them. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. For those who are new, welcome. So we're going to get right into it now. The unlikely pair is barely out of town. Whoop! Blytis does not know what just hit him. In fact, his unconscious state makes it clear he is not even aware that he has been hit. Beruzzi, however, is fully aware of what just happened, knowing that it is a long road between here and there, and knowing Blytis Roidin's ability to murder in cold blood and enjoy the profits thereof, Beruzzi endeavors to eliminate a risk that Blytis would without a doubt exploit at the first opportunity. He used Blytis' own gun to administer the blow, by sliding his sack from the front to the right side of his body, almost to the rear, away from Blytis. He unclipped the sack, reached in and positioned the gun with his right hand. Then, while straightening his body out as though stretching his back, he slammed the revolver against Blytis' temple, rendering the brute unconscious. Using rope from the wagon that is a staple for securing slaves during transport, Beruzzi quickly ties up his captive. He ties him around the waist to the seat on which he sits, a seat made of cedar planks separated by thumb-sized gaps. He ties his feet apart to the supports of the seat. He ties him at the elbows, one arm away from the other, to the back of the seat. Blytis is well tied. Even so, Baruzzi ensures there is nothing within arm's reach that could be used to turn the situation against him. Horses will follow a path that is set before them. Therefore, no time is lost while Baruzzi tends to Blytis. With his captive now physically restrained, Baruzzi takes the reins, but he does not hold on to them. Instead, he lets them droop over the wooden rail before him. He then retrieves his notepad, ink jar, and feather pen from his rectangular sack and starts to write, in the lull of the peaceful wagon ride. Blytis wakes up to an excruciating headache. 3 hours have passed since Baruzzi delivered the blow that knocked him out. It takes him a moment to figure out why he is where he is and why he is with whom he is. Softly the groans in response to his pain. He attempts to reach for his temple, but finds his hands are constrained. Now he realizes that he is shackled to the seat. The gravity of his situation makes him wish he were still asleep. Pressing the back of his head as far back into the seat as it will go, which is to no further depth than a wooden plank will allow, he uses what little energy he has to berate Baruzzi. You are one sick bastard. You know that? Baruzzi is not fazed by his companion's opinion of him. He answers with a casual, yeah. I need to piss. I am hungry, Blytis informs him. It will be dark soon. When it gets dark enough, I will stop and boil up some of the potatoes and smoked bacon you keep on board. That maggot-infested bacon is for the slaves. I can't eat that. Repulsed that Baruzzi would consider such a thing, moreover suggested, he makes himself clear. I would never ever eat maggots. Then you will have just potatoes. But by the time you get to Baton Rouge, you will be begging for a piece of that same maggot-infested bacon. And if you can't keep your piss until dinner time, then go ahead and piss on yourself. It is nothing new. My nostrils are immune to your stench, you evil son of a bitch. I want water, Blytis demands. That I have managed to secure for you while you slept comfortably. When Baruzzi had stopped by the stream along the pathway, he had watered the horses, allowed them to graze, and had filled up 2 of the water barrels Blytis keeps on board his slave's transport wagon. Now he reaches over his shoulder with the arm close to Blytis, dips into the water vessel with a ladle, fills up the metal drinking can, and hands the water to Blytis by putting the can into Blytis' grip. Blytis takes a hold of the can without uttering the thank you that Baruzzi is not expecting. How do you expect me to drink it with my hands tied to this thing? I don't. I just want you to experience the feeling of holding it while not being able to drink it. Kind of like my being able to touch completeness in my life, but not being able to hold on to it, thanks to your greed and your wickedness, which are really the 2 sides of the same thing. He makes a futile attempt to throw the can at Baruzzi, but his limited movement causes the can to drop at his feet. If you want any more water today, you better start apologizing. What do you mean any more? I didn't get any. You're a fine one to talk about wickedness. Pausing to study the vulnerability of the pathetic creature tied up next to him, Baruzzi reaches for the metal can that, according to the movement of the wagon, keeps rolling about both their feet. He picks it up, fills it up, and puts the water to the mouth of his mortal enemy, who drinks like a greedy child. Instead of saying thank you, he demands another serving. More. He does not get it. No, you will spoil your appetite for dinner. Like I said, you are one sick bastard. Yep. Baruzzi agrees as he reaches into his magic sack, pulls out a jar of Ventensi's peach preserves, opens the lid, reaches in again for his spoon, and readjusts his position to enjoy a small pleasure made with the love he seeks to bring back to his daily life. I don't suppose you're going to share that, are you? Hell no. Nope. This was made with love by my wife, a good woman whom you sold out of greed and spite. You don't get to enjoy anything of hers. As promised, just before nightfall and 48 hours after his family was taken from him, Baruzzi stops at the edge of town. This is where he is going to camp for the night. As he examines the scenery, he is disrupted by Blytis' demand to relieve himself of the urine he has been holding for hours. Baruzzi is very careful of the amount of physical freedom he allows Blytis. Thus, although Blytis is allowed to align from the wagon, he is still tied to it, and his arms are now tied together at the elbows and then tied to the cart, with only enough slack for him to adjust his clothing to relieve his sorted urine and scratch the frontal midsection of his body. Baruzzi goes about preparing his captive's dinner. He makes a wood fire using the resources kept on the wagon and dried wood littered about the campsite. He checks as to whether Blytis has changed his mind about eating a serving of the maggot-infested bacon. Nope, no change in appetite there. Further supplies that are stored on board the wagon and liberally replenished by his stable hand after each trade trip, Blytis gets a cup of coffee with his boiled potatoes. Still standing but leaning his back against the wagon, he eats and drinks with a hatred for Baruzzi that makes his thoughts clear to both men. This will not be forgotten. Baruzzi is actually feeding on the hatred Blytis feels for him. It reassures him that he is having the effect on Blytis that he deserves. After Blytis has eaten, it is Baruzzi's turn to eat. However, before he does so, he aims to put his charge to bed. Tuck him in. It's time to set up your bedding for the night. I'm not sleepy, retorts Blytis. I didn't ask you if you were sleepy. I said it's time to set up your bedding. Blytis does not move. In response to the belligerent man's refusal to move, Baruzzi grabs a piece of wood from the fire and shoves it against Blytis' backside. He feels the burn and responds immediately by jumping onto the bed of the wagon. His urgency came more from his desire to get as much distance as possible between himself and Baruzzi than from his desire to obey his master's command. Master is in quotes. Now that Baruzzi is tied him to the back of the wagon, he pokes Blytis in his backside again. This time when Blytis opens his mouth wide to scream, Baruzzi stuffs a grass plug in it and ties it in with a strip of burlap. He then covers Blytis with sheets of burlap and drives the wagon into town by the torch lamp that is used for night travel. Once he gets to town, he secures the horses and double checks on his captive. All is well. As expected, the general store is closed, and as expected, the shopkeeper, who also lives there, is still awake, burning enough light to signal that he may still be open for business. Baruzzi knocks on the burglar-barred door. There is no immediate response. He knocks again. A slot in the door is slid open by a shrewd-looking older man. The candlelight held just inches from his face. "Can't you see the store is closed?" The stack of money that greets his coldness immediately warms him up. He notices the list inserted between the banknotes and gently pulls it open. He positions a candle to enable himself to read the list. I guess I can help you, but I don't open my door after dark. I don't expect that you would, Baruzzi informs him. It will take me a while to get all the stuff together. I can wait, Baruzzi tells him, as though he has all night. The shopkeeper slams the slot shut. Oh my goodness. About 10 minutes passes before the shopkeeper opens the upper portion of the door and hands Baruzzi one burlap bag, then another, and then a third. The money Baruzzi has given him more than covers the value of the goods. But Baruzzi hands him another small pile of banknotes nonetheless. In one trip, although with difficulty, Baruzzi carries his supplies to the nearby wagon. He puts them next to his charge and covers them with burlap sheets from the abundant supply in the wagon, meant for slave bedding and garments, where Blytis is to actually go on a slave buying trip. A quick check on his charge reveals that he is still very much alive. Disgruntled, irate, uncomfortable, but alive. Baruzzi scans the area for somewhere he can possibly get a hot meal. He sees several possibilities. He settles for the nearest one. As far as one, in his circumstances, can enjoy anything. He takes the time to enjoy his meal. 2 steaks served with mashed potatoes and gravy and a jug of beer in the company of others. He leaves the establishment with a certain sense of contentment brought on by the food he has just enjoyed. Thoughts of Blytis and the loss of Ventesi and the children cover his awareness just like his skin covers his flesh. Therefore, his first inclination upon leaving the restaurant is to check on the status of Blytis. He is in no rush to remove the gag from Blytis' mouth, and so he leaves it in place until they are back at the edge of town, where the duo spends the night. One can hardly call the night's sleep restful for many reasons, not the least of which is Baruzzi's number of checks on Blytis throughout the night. This is his third morning of waking up without his wife and children around him, so it is now more than 60 hours since they were taken from him. Blytis wakes up demanding breakfast. One meal for the day is all you get, and it's not yet dinner time, not even close. Now shut up and get ready to take your piss so you can take your seat up front where I can see you. Blytis knows better than to argue. He is a quick learner. His backside still burns, not knowing what Baruzzi will come up with next to make him conform. His master's word is now enough for his compliance. Once again, master in quotes. By midday, Baruzzi decides that he must give the horses a rest, otherwise they won't be of much good to him. The river alongside which they travel is not at all difficult to access. Grass in plentiful supply, thus ensuring the horses are properly fed in just a matter of time allocation. And this is Denise speaking here. I now understand why the grass around his cabin was so neatly so neatly cropped after he had been away at sea for so long. Travelers feed their horses and oxen by the wayside without necessarily disturbing dwellings they come across. Kind of like how strangers in my younger days would stop on the nearest veranda to get shelter from a heavy downpour of rain, and as they still do in my father's childhood district in Bagwalk, St. Catharines, Jamaica. The unlikely companions frequently greet and pass other travelers on the road, but they seem to be unaware of the sub-people in the bushes who see them all the time. Blytis, for day one on the road, chose to tolerate his circumstance rather than to face the sure rejection of passerby whom he might have otherwise tried to engage in conversation long enough for any of them to catch the wind of him. Now, on day 2 of travel, he is starting to reconsider just how much the rejection of passerby really matters to him based on their assignment of his personal hygiene, based on their assessment of his personal hygiene. He is hungry, angry, tired, hurt, and exhausted, but he still cares enough about the gallows and his fortune to remain quiet. Baruzzi does not deprive himself of food, nor does he consider the hunger of his companion when he eats. What little energy Blytis has, he uses to complain incessantly about his inhumane treatment. He was expecting that Baruzzi would stop and cook for him again. Instead, at dinner time, 72 hours since Baruzzi's family was taken from him, Baruzzi reaches into the container in which he had boiled the potatoes and hands Blytis a potato, skin and all. "You can't be serious," Blytis scoffs. Baruzzi does not even bother to dignify the remark with an answer. In fact, he does not even divert his attention from his travel to acknowledge Blytis Roidin complaints. Realizing there is nothing else to be had, Blytis breaks the potato open and takes a mouthful from one half. Even with his mouth full, he still manages to complain. "I can't believe you're not even going to give me anything to wash it down." Again, it is as though he is having a conversation with himself. Baruzzi has effectively tuned him out. The relentless man nonetheless finds a way to engage Baruzzi in conversation. "You treat the horses a lot better than you are treating me. The horses didn't sell my wife and children into slavery. You did. My wife and children do not get to enjoy a meal of their choosing, and until they do, neither do you. I am a white man. You can't treat me like this." "I can, and I am, because I can. Now shut up or else I will gag you again." He knows Baruzzi will not hesitate to force his mouth open in order to gag him again. He therefore does the best he can under the circumstances, mutters to himself through gritted teeth, "I can't believe you would treat me like this over a bunch of niggers, especially since they fetched such a good price. You ungrateful." The effect of his last statement on Baruzzi compels him to focus his attention on his travel companion. He considers administering another solid blow to Blytis' temple, but he decides against it. "You're not worth the effort." They have long settled in for the night when Baruzzi senses someone hovering over him, but he does not move. When he settles down in the dark, his hand is always near the revolver in his sack. He finds it without moving any part of his body except his wrist and fingers. It is cocked into the face of the figure. "Move, and I will blow your effing head off." The figure stays put. "Just wanted some food, massa. Hungry, massa." It is obvious to Baruzzi that any black-skinned being out this time of night by himself must be a hungry runaway slave. He asks a question nonetheless. "Why are you out in the woods by yourself?" The figure does not answer because he is sure this white man is going to either turn him in for a reward of returned runaway property or try to sell him as his property. Baruzzi tells him the obvious, that being, "You can't escape, you know. There's no place for you to run." "Yes, massa, but I've been free for 2 days." "Free? 2 days? Free from whom? From where?" Baruzzi inquires. The runaway does not answer, his reason being the certainty he feels that this white man will forcefully return him to where he belongs and collect whatever reward in exchange for his relative freedom, or merely seize him for himself. Beruzzi knows he's the one who has to initiate friendship. He keeps the gun trained on the subject whom he can see clearly enough in the moonlight. He reaches into one of the sacks containing the supplies he purchased and hands a piece of cured meat to the subject. Thank you, massa, thank you. With the gun still trained on him, he eats as though the food were all he could really see. Beruzzi reaches into the sack again and gives him a bottle of juice. The runaway can barely believe his good fortune. He looks at the bottle and then at Beruzzi before he takes it, with a nod of thank you, his mouth full of food, thus preserving his speech. In one draw, he drinks almost the entire contents of the bottle. He appears apologetic that he has consumed so much while not sure whether he should be a complete glutton and drink the remainder. Beruzzi beckons to him to go ahead and finish it. Now he hands him a chunk of bread. The runaway wonders whether he has already taken too much from this unlikely hospitable host. Go ahead, take it, Beruzzi encourages him. Blytis has had enough. He throws the burlap cover completely off his head and rebukes, "You feed that runaway nigger, but then you treat me. It's against the law to feed him a runaway." "You shut up," Beruzzi demands. Disgusted, Blytis yanks the cover back over his head. This is good for Beruzzi because it gives him a chance to have a meaningful conversation with this newly arrived guest. "You don't need to tell me who owns you, but what I want to know is whether you have seen a particular wagon carrying a bunch of slaves in the last 2 or maybe 3 days. A wagon carrying a slave woman and her 3-year-old twin boy and girl. A woman calls the girl Mabel and the boy Abel," the runaway asks. Beruzzi struck. "You saw them? Where? When?" "I was in the group, massa. Ran away like I been planning from before I got to this land. Ran away when massa stopped to change horses 2 days ago." "Where are they being taken?" Talk solid. Talk. "Sold in Baton Rouge and then—" He raises both hands in surrender, one still holding a piece of bread. "Mabel and Abel, fine children. Between meals, mother keeps feeding them food out of her clothing. Food she gives to another baby girl, too. She comforts them, the 3 of them, by giving them breast milk like newborn." And this is Denise, the writer, speaking here. Well, I'll just read it. "It is not by chance that the runaway knows the names of the twins. Being able to give information about each other to each other is a deeply rooted, unspoken tactic captives have used to keep track of each other from the start of their fight to be freed from the mental chains of bondage. And knowing that maybe 1 or 2 slaves may escape from the lot, the bunch take every opportunity to show each other their scars, know each other's names, and the names of their significant other. Remember the name of the place they hear they are headed. And knowing anything at all they feel will maintain the link to their bloodline until that day of freedom each one is innately expecting." I feel moved to say something here. See, when our foreparents, those who were not already here when their captors arrived, those who were stolen from Africa, their one desire after being captured was freedom. They never gave up on the dream of freedom, and that is what carried a lot of them through the hardships that they experienced, because freedom was a dream. Freedom was a thing they never lost sight of, and that helped a lot of them to survive the hardships that they survived. Anyway, I will get back to this, because if I allow what is trying to take place to take place, I will go off on an entirely different lesson than the one that I'm trying to read here. So I'm not going to go there. I hope I've made that clear. Beruzzi, confident that he has made a friend, lowers the gun. He knows what little food Ventesi is able to provide to the children between their meager rations is not enough. Nonetheless, he is thankful to her God that she is able to supplement the inadequate amounts of food they get. He knows her well enough to know she will abstain from eating to feed them, and that creates another worry for him. You've been here in this area since they passed here 2 days ago? Yes, massa, nowhere to go, but I'm free. You said they changed horses. Yes, get fresh ones before a new day. Beruzzi reasons. They've been traveling for about 78 hours straight, not stopping to sleep nor rest their horses. They get fresh horses, therefore making their journey non-stop for sleep. Since that is the case, after 78 hours of straight travel for them, they could very well be in Baton Rouge by now, and my family sold by now again. How long have you been in America? Beruzzi wants to know. The runaway slave answers while putting his trust in the God he serves. 2 harvest time gone, but still he pauses before adding, and another harvest soon coming. What was your master's name on the ship that brought you to America? Massa Tobin, and then Massa Roidin. Beruzzi realizes he was one of the freed slaves belonging to Dreyfus Tobin. So does Blytis, who shifts uneasily where he lies, but saying nothing. Under the light of the moon, Beruzzi takes out his notepad, his inkwell, and his feather pen and begins to write. Once done, he rips off the sheet of paper, folds it, and puts it in an empty peach jar. He seals the jar and hands it to the runaway. Now he grabs an empty burlap bag and stuffs some food into it. Handing the bag of food to the runaway along with another empty sack for covering in the cool of the night, he tells him, I cannot take you with me, but if you stay in hiding until after harvest and you make it back to New Orleans, get to the sheriff, give him that note. I can probably help you then. The runaway does not know what is in the note, but he is thankful to have come across a white man who is so kind, and he therefore trusts in the hope that this white man has given him. A white man whom he remembers from another time, the time on the slave ship. He clutches the sack to his chest and the jar even closer. Thank you, massa, before he heads off into the night. Blytis is extremely uncomfortable with what just transpired between the runaway and Beruzzi. You told him you were going to help him. What do you plan on doing? Taking him? You just can't take other people's property. It's none of your business. But just so we are clear, I did not say I was going to help him. What I said was I could probably help him. Secondly, ironic that you should say you just can't take other people's property. It was never yours to sell, you thieving scoundrel. Shut up and go back to sleep. Beruzzi's actions and statements regarding the runaway now raise a new wave of worry in Blytis. That is, he may lose a significant number of his slaves and still be treated and still be tried and convicted of being a slave thief, a penalty of death by hanging or the gallows, but imprisonment at the very least. He remains quiet, pondering his fate, pondering a chance to get rid of this tormentor who is the obstacle between himself and his happiness, which is his wealth. My sister Denise is speaking here again. We each have our angels and our guides. the slave whom Beruzi fed, like all of us, made the choice to take his assignment. His human consciousness does not remember the time, nor does it remember the place where the decision was made, but the essence of who he is. His spirit consciousness knows his purpose, and that part of who he is will ensure he does not return to the God of all gods without fulfilling his purpose. Hence, as he walks away into the night, he being Beruzi, sees as a hopeless soul in a hopeless situation is actually a being who in part embodies the hope of future generations, bearing a hue such as his. What Beruzi does not see is the host of beings who walk presently behind him in the light that shineth in the darkness, the light that his human eye is too limited to see unless what he does not know is that only by being here on this side of the world long enough will an atmosphere be created wherein bronze beings seen as black will occupy the place that the God of all gods is preparing for them. Even the runaway in his physical form does not know the depth of the effect of his prayers that he will pray that night in these woods under this moonlight, which is also subject to his God, the God of all gods. Blytis too has his angels and guides about him, angels and guides from a God who is not the God of all gods, but a God that is subject to the God of all gods. Just as the angels and guides who are working for the God of all gods rejoice when their charges make gains in their assignments, so too do Blytis angels and guides rejoice in his tribulation when his misdeeds turn on him, just as they rejoice when he brings misery to the lives of others. That is their nature. Thus they do what is natural to them in being advocates and paradoxically adversaries in their charge's life. Therefore, unless he, Blytis, chooses to widen the crack of light within himself, his angels and guides will forever aid him in his misdeeds and rejoice when he suffers the consequences of whatever he chooses to sow in his life. That is some powerful stuff there for those of us who understands what is going on there. They resumed their travel before sunrise. It is 86 hours since Beruzi's family was taken from him. Beruzi is aware that he cannot close the 2 days travel gap between himself and his family. Even so, he tries to gain as much ground as possible. When he stops to boil more potatoes in the afternoon, while watering the horses and giving them a rest, he makes enough coffee to last for days. Once it cools, he drinks some in the hope that it will keep his energy at its peak, enabling him therefore to control the horses more alertly than when he is lulled by their rhythmic gait. He is not in a hurry to feed Blytis his daily meal of 1 potato and a cup of coffee. The villain will have to wait until his scheduled dinner time. Blytis is losing energy. The lack of food and the constant travel are taking a toll on him. Beruzi now uses food as a bribe. You keep your mouth shut if we're asked anything by this posse up ahead, and you may get 2 apples. Once they are gone, open your mouth and I will close it with the bullet of this gun, and then tell them to come near to get a whiff of you. It shouldn't be hard to explain then that you are entirely deranged, and that is why you are tied to this bench. Within moments of their sighting, the rough-looking posse of 9 riders is upon them, encircling them, violating their travel space, hindering their horses' ability to move forward, and thus forcing them to stop. The lead rider, positioned slightly off-center of Beruzi's wagon, engages him in conversation, over which he clearly intends to keep control. Seen any runaway niggers around here? Any niggers looking for food? He does not wait for an answer before he tells his men, start checking under the wagon and poke those sacks on the bed to see if anything squeals or if anything red starts leaking out. The men do not appear to be offended by Blytis' stench, since their nearness dictates that his smell is already unavoidable. Yet they immediately move to their boss' directive without hesitating to get closer. Baruzzi's plan for dealing with the posse as respectable equals crossing path has been thrown completely off kilter by the posse's lack of basic civility. He tries to adjust his plan while providing an answer. Nope, seen a lot of people but no runaways looking for food. Didn't ask you about people, I asked you about niggers. Big black buck, pink frilly skirt, white lacy bonnet. I see him now standing right there beside you. Blytis sees an angel, not because he has let any light through his crack. He sees the angel because the angel has stepped out of the light and into his sphere of darkness, into the darkness to this world. As a result, he sees not for the purpose of enlightenment, but to cause him further blindness in his unrepentant state. He's about to get the butt of a rifle for being a wisecracker. That's the reason he's tied up. And Baruzzi saves him by quickly speaking up for him. Blytis appears to have tuned out from the people around him as he questions the angel's attire. Big black buck in a pink frilly skirt and a lacy white bonnet. Nothing back here, Captain. One of the men checking the bed of the wagon calls out. The captain takes a final look at the two people he sees as not worth his time. He spits out the literal disgusting air and signals for his team to move on. They are gone with just about the same speed with which they had descended on the duo. That was ingenious, Blytis, even for you. I would never have thought of anything like that. Anything like what? Like what you just did, pretending to see a runaway laughing under his breath in a pink frilly skirt. I didn't pretend anything. I saw him in his pink frilly skirt and his... All right, I get it, Baruzzi pacifies him. But in actuality, he does not get it. He does not realize that the angels of the runaway continue to monitor his affairs through the runaway himself, as though the runaway himself has disappeared from his sight. Here are your 2 apples. You earned them. The apples are a welcome break from the barely palatable potatoes Blytis has been eating. He wastes no time sinking his teeth into one and then the other, eating both by alternating his bites into each. And here's a peach for coming up with that incredible ploy. Blytis' mouth is too occupied for him to bother trying to convince Baruzzi of anything. A grunt of a thank you is all he manages. He swallows and now manages a full sentence. How about a bottle of them drinks you got back there? He gets one. There, that's enough. Not that he wouldn't want to continue milking the situation for all it can produce, but he realizes his stroke of genius is not about to yield him any more good fortune presently. He takes comfort in knowing that today he gets 2 meals, though the evening meal will not be as appetizing as the one he's currently enjoying. Baruzzi considers the gap between the time his family was taken from their home and the time he left in pursuit of them. At present, 87 hours have passed since his wife and children were taken. That is enough time for them to have arrived in Baton Rouge. He placed in a holding pen be placed in a holding pen for resale, sold on an auction block, and be sent to a local population, or worse yet, shipped to. He is at a loss of how he will approach the various scenarios once he arrives at his destination. A memory from Honoru reminds him that he has reliable help. You have all that you need right here in this house to regain your family permanently. Although Honoru's words give him hope, comfort, he nonetheless knows that having all the tools necessary to regain his family is no good to him unless he properly utilizes the tools. No guide or angel on his own is going to pull Beruzi's family out of slavery and bring them back to him. He has a very active and essential role to play in their release. Unfortunately, he cannot match to the pace of the people whose trail he follows, because there is no one to substitute in his watch over Blytis. He does not want Blytis to get more rest than he does, and therefore ends up with a better mental acuity where control of their situation is concerned. As a result, he keeps Blytis awake as he travels well into the dark before stopping for sleep. He awakens before Blytis. This is his fourth day on the trail. It has been 94 hours since the separation from his family. He is tired, but he is also very driven. He figures 2 more days at the most, and he will be in Baton Rouge. Beruzi decides to warm up some sausages for his breakfast. The aroma is too much for Blytis to bear. He watches Beruzi devour the first piece. He knows that as soon as Beruzi is done eating, it will be time to leave. Meat! I want meat, he demands. You can have meat, but I have already told you what kind of meat you're going to have. Fine! Fry up a piece of the nigger's pork belly for me. Peruzzi readily obliges him, but not so much because he cares anything about Blytis Roidin, as it is the case that he is willing to feed him the rotten meat to demoralize him. He gets up from his meal, goes to the supply in the wagon, and slices off 2 strips of bacon. He then drops them in the frying pan and puts the frying pan back on the fire. Within minutes, he hands them to Blytis on a metal platter. That's better than how you serve it to them. Enjoy. Blytis takes the platter from Beruzi, hissing sound of hatred. He has not finished his first piece of bacon before he starts demanding that Beruzi serves up some more. You are rationing me of my own food. I want more than this. That is all you're getting. Keep complaining, and I will take that piece from you too. He reserves his further muttering until the second piece is safely secured in his belly. Coffee. I need coffee to wash it down. From the metal jug of coffee that Beruzi had warmed, he pours some into a smaller mug and hands it to the grumbling, disgusting being he is forced to tolerate. They are halfway through their 4th day. The sheriff of the town up ahead is riding on horseback towards them. Blytis, for whatever reason, decides this is his chance to be rescued. He forgets about his stench and the gallows and the certain loss of most of his wealth, if not all, and calls out to the sheriff, kicking his legs and flinging his chained hands where he sits beside Beruzi. Sheriff! Shut up! Beruzi grunts under his breath. That should have been, shut up. Blytis disregards the order, bellowing, Sheriff! I am being tortured, starved, help me! Sheriff within earshot to begin with stops his horse a few feet from the wagon and signals Beruzi to stop. It is obvious that he smells the stench as he sharply exhales. Phew! The air he has just taken in through his mouth. What seems to be the matter here? Beruzi opens his mouth to answer. Good day, Sheriff. Blytis shuts him out of the conversation. This man took me out of my house at gunpoint. He is eager to tell all. while being true to his character. He embellishes, and he does it in rapid succession. He tied me up, is starving me, wants me to buy back slaves for him, slaves I owned, thinks the niggers are his wife and children, wouldn't let me change my pants before he took me out of my house, wouldn't let me bathe in the river, fed runaway nigger better than he feeds me, and this lump on my temple here, he gave it to me with the butt of my own gun. The sheriff listens carefully without interrupting and then asks Beruzi, why do you have this man chained in your wagon like a slave? Sheriff, this man is deranged. He thinks he is a rich slave trader named Blytis Roidin, when in actuality he is a farmer from Baton Rouge. His wife, my sister, is worried sick about him. That is why she sent me this letter, handing to the sheriff the letter he had written at the start of the journey. She wrote, beseeching me to bring him home so that he can get the help he needs. If I untie him, he will just run off to God knows where. He urinates on himself all the time and refuses to wash himself in the river along the way. If I did not feel that brotherly love for him, I would have tied him in the back as I do my slaves. Instead, I keep him up here beside me, hoping I can reason with him. I tell you, Sheriff. Liar, liar, Blytis interrupts. Quiet, the sheriff demands. Liar, Blytis continues. He cuts his speech now that he realizes his interruptions are losing him credibility with the sheriff. Sheriff Beruzi explains further. Just yesterday, a few towns back, he was telling a posse out looking for runaway slaves that he saw a big black buck wearing a pink frilly skirt and a white lacy bonnet standing in their midst. Why, one fellow was about to smash him with a rifle when I saved him, as I have been saving him from himself for weeks. I've been putting up with the stench of him for days because I can't risk losing him. He gave me this plum on my forehead when I tried to get him to wash himself in the river. The sheriff finished reading the letter just at the time Beruzi finishes his explanation. He hands the letter back to Beruzi, blowing out the hair of Blytis' stench from his mouth. That's a commendable thing you're doing for your sister and for him, and he does not even have the mental capacity to appreciate it. Wishing Beruzi Godspeed to the interruption of Blytis' protest. It's a lie, I tell you. The sheriff rides off in the direction he was headed when Blytis demands his service. With the sheriff now out of earshot, Beruzi tells the villain, you get no more food today. That stunt of yours shall not go unpunished. I ought to knock your teeth out. Blytis does not hold back in telling his captor, you are even sicker than I am. A much better liar to be sure. I never knew you. You are worse than your brother. Not getting an argument from Beruzi, the scoundrel becomes reflective. After spending months at sea with you, I still never knew you, not one bit, not until now. Who would have thought? True to his word, all Beruzi gives Blytis to consume for the rest of the day and to keep him through the night is water. And we will leave it there for now. We will pick up next time on chapter 13, the retrieval. If you've enjoyed your time with me, or even if you haven't enjoyed your time with me, I humbly request that you like, share, subscribe, and comment. As I said, we will pick it up next time at chapter 13. So I wish you Barak and Shalom.